Yo, what up, everybody? Sorry that I wasn't here last Friday. I got my second COVID shot. If you have not already, please consider getting vaccinated. I know that this has become a hot button topic in America and I think just globally, but I just want to make it clear that the sooner that we get vaccinated, the safer we can be and the better off we'll be. And if you're afraid of getting vaccinated, I understand that. Like between Tuskegee experiments and many other crappy things that the American government has done to Black people, I understand the reticence. But if you're on the fence about it and considering it, please get vaccinated. If you are new to the stream or whether you know me or not, I think it's always fun to introduce yourself. My name's Andre LaRoe. I'm coming at you from Brooklyn, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. I'm a visual artist and I like to stream. The folks at Behance reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in streaming, and now I have the pleasure of streaming and talking about, my ethos and my process for photography and for editing. So today we're going to be talking about how to give your photos a consistent look and feel, and we're going to be using Lightroom. But first, I always like to say hello, encourage you to ask any questions that you have. I'm streaming and having a good time, so feel free to pop in and ask questions at any time. The things that you ask help drive the stream. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to get started. And if there's anything that you're curious about, you feel free to kind of interject and ask questions along the way. So anyway, as you can imagine, I'm going to be opening up Lightroom. And if you write a comment and I don't see it, write it again, because sometimes I'm realizing now that some of the comments aren't populating in for some reason. And also, for anyone that is doing so, it is the opening tip-off night of the WNBA. So please, if you're a basketball fan, if you call yourself a basketball fan, take some time to watch the WNBA. They're great, super competitive games, really talented women, and a great excuse to watch basketball all year long. This isn't Coca-Cola. But yeah, let's get started. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up, they want to talk to? I see Brent gave me a little like. I appreciate that, my Utes. Shout out to Brent for the New York Times. So I'm going to add the shared screen in right now. Actually, you know what? Before we add the shared screen, I'm going to show y'all a couple things that I've been up to that I'm excited about, because, why not? Oh, hey, Moat. How you doing? I really appreciate all your positive vibes. Really, thank y'all. Okay, so first and foremost, I am launching a Patreon within the next 2 months. And if you have any interest in doing that, please reach out, send me a DM, give me your email, and I can introduce you to that. So just a couple things I want to bring up that I'm excited about. I want to do a better job of starting these off in a positive way. So we're going to share screen to what I'm doing right now. All right, so first and foremost, obviously, WNBA Twitter, shout out to the fact that, the women are tipping off tonight, and shout out to y'all watching it. All right, so we're going to go to my page. And the first thing I want to bring up is this week Wired published an article that included some tips from me about how to take great photos of yourself using your phone. I know some of y'all hear me say that and you think I'm making it up. Really true. First and foremost, any camera that you have access to is your best camera. I'm going to put this link in the chat. But, whether you're a first-time photographer or you're just a human that wants to take great photos of yourself, this is full of tips just to find your great light and how to have some calm little portraits of you. And in case anyone is curious, look at this picture of my face. Oh, it's gone. Oh no, hold on. Look at this picture of my face. Right? All right, I'll drop the link in the comments. But if you, for whatever reason, are curious, you read it and you have more things you want to know, you feel free to reach out to me. But essentially, I talk about picking a nice background, wearing something classic, checking your camera settings, and just like finding great light. But there's other great photographers in here, like my fellow Lightroom ambassador, Luisa Dor from Brazil. She's amazing. Obviously, we talk a little bit about Lightroom. Shout out to my corporate overlord slash business zaddy. And then I just wanted to bring up, like, when I showed this photo earlier, I just really want y'all to think about the idea of doing a self-study, right? Looking at pictures of your face, looking at how you look at different light and different angles, and starting to get comfortable with who you are. Because if you can start a self-study, whenever you do work with a photographer, whether it's yourself or a friend or whatever, you can know what to expect. I think sometimes photography can be in danger of being bad because we come in with pre-existing thoughts about how we want to look absolutely amazing. But in actuality, we look like we look, and we need to be okay with that. What does that mean? So for me, my hair during quarantine has been a mix of stress and weird. So I'm dreading on the sides. The top is like really flat and kind of thinning. And like, I need to be okay with that. And I think sometimes self-study with photography can be good. What does that look like? It means maybe taking a photo every couple of days. I just put these, the link in the comments. What up, Mo? Anyone else got any other questions before we get started? I'm just kind of doing a couple quick hits of things I've been up to. And the other thing I want to bring up is I'm a big fan of the show I work on, W. Kamau Bell's United Shades of America on CNN. And if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, every week when the new episode premieres, it's an 8-episode season, actually it's a 7-episode season this year, you'll see some BTS that I shared. So the other thing I want to bring up is the last 2 days I streamed with Adobe on Adobe Live, which if you're watching through Behance, you're very familiar with Adobe Live, giving essentially like a 4-hour masterclass on what we're talking about today. So if you're curious about it, I have the links on YouTube that I can share at the end. But this is going to kind of be the Cliff Notes version of this 4-hour talk because ain't nobody got time to be streaming for 4 hours. So I'm going to drop the video in here, but also if you go to YouTube and you just search my name, you should see, yep, developing a consistent style. Also, can we just talk about when you search my name, like the third thing down is a picture of me and Ludacris? How cool is that? All right, so I'll drop this in the chat. So there y'all go. All right, so now that we got kind of the highlights out of the way, is there any questions anyone has? Anything else that I want to touch, or I should touch on before we kind of get into this? Shout out to this guy commenting who spit the gum out. I'm good, bro. I'm chewing gum because I'm stressed out. It's a long time. My life is long and a little boring sometimes, and I like gum, so I eat it. So anyway, everybody, we got that up. We got to look at what I've been up to. So let's get into what we came here for, how to edit, why we want to edit, what we're caring about. And I'll read this article later. All right, so now we're in Lightroom, our very favorite application, the one we know the best. What are we going to do today? We're going to go over what is in the color panel, how we use it, why we want to use it, and how we develop a consistent style. So before we get any further in, I want to bring a couple things. Being consistent as a photographer requires a devotion to observation. Photography is an art of observation, right? What that means is like you are studying everything around you so that you can capture it not only to the best of your ability, but also have it be reflective of that environment and make sure that the image you make is accurate to the environment and to your vision of it. What I mean by that, right? Sometimes I find street photography by folks that don't live in the places to be kind of frustrating and exploitative because they might come in and see something that they think looks poor or sad and capture it, when in actuality, for the people that live there, that thing might be reflective of where they came from, or it might be reflective of, you know, a cultural touch point that this person doesn't understand. I'll tell you, I'd say this to y'all very often. Make sure that when you're photographing things that are things you have access to, and that way you can have a great an accurate representation of what you're capturing. But what you have access to, you have the most to lose, and you feel the most accountable for. Does that make sense? I'm going to put this little comment in there so I can see it's smart. Okay, so speaking of observation, there are two main things that I want you to keep in mind. Number one, that you rarely can control your light, right? You can if you're in a studio, but especially if you're outside, or if you're in a mixed light scenario where there's light from outside, light from inside, you recognize that you can have some educated guesses, but the light does what the lights want to do. Well, what the light wants to do, if that makes sense. Some days it's overcast, and when you photograph at high noon, it looks beautiful. There's like nice soft shadows, and sometimes the sun is really strong and it's reflecting off something you didn't anticipate, like snow or something else, and it just gives this like ethereal feel. And so I just want to point out, like, to start, being consistent doesn't always mean that you are the master of your fate. It just means that you can start to look at specific things and specific ways for you to edit, that you can use in an advantageous way to create what you want, if that makes sense. Shout out to my folks on Behance watching. Shout out to the people on Twitter and Facebook watching. As always, please let me know if you have any questions. We're talking about, before we get into how we edit consistently, we're talking about how we photograph consistently. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to use one of my favorite examples. This is the ProPhoto C1 Plus. It's this really sweet strobe light that syncs with your phone. But for this exercise, it's going to be our sun. So let me make my face a little bigger. Okay. So this is what I look like normally, right? If you've seen it, it's underwhelming, whatever. All right. We know that lighting-wise, things we want to avoid, we never want to light someone from below because it looks like they're Hannibal Lecter and they're terrifying and they're like, right? We also don't want our light source to be too close to a subject. Look at how when I move away, how the light starts to dissipate evenly, and you can see the detail. You can see this really garbage beard that I have, right? Let's move it back closer again, right? So what I mean by that, I mean, like, as you start to want to photograph consistently, you want to ask yourself, where is my light coming from, and how do I want to use it, right? So if for some reason, I don't know, you're in like the Empire State Building and it's sunset, obviously the light's going to be coming from a side. But, you know, in the middle of the day, the light's doing this. And if you're wearing a hat, it's doing this, making a really sharp shadow on your face. And so if you're trying to take a photo of somebody, you either take the hat off or you put them in a nice even shadow like the side of a building, right? And that comes with practice. Because often, like, just like with anything else, all of us just want to go home and like watch The Office. And so our art of observation can be sped up by our desire to finish what we're doing quickly. But, you know, being, I think, a strong visual artist means taking that third breath and that third step to not present your subject in bad light, but in light that works well for them. Like if we did something like this, that was further away, but facing me, it was soft. Now you can see there's casting a shadow behind me. There is a light right there and a light right here. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in 1 second, but let's all say goodbye to the ProPhoto. That's our sun. Basically, remember, like, the sun rises and sets, right? And throughout the day, just look at how this light touches and changes my face as we go through, right? Now, obviously, this changes the closer the light source is, but generally, you want your light to be strong and even. I didn't say close, and strong doesn't mean this. Strong means something strong enough that you can have it far enough away to be flattering, right? But even enough that you can see my whole face and not apart, where there's a hot zone, right? We'll turn this light off and pause, see if we have any questions. Moat to avoid, you're right. Overcast is not bad for many things. It's not at all. Overcast can be really, really helpful. It can be something that you can use to your advantage. Something you can use to your advantage to take a nice, respectful photo. That, like, what was I going to say? Like, respectful being like, it gives you the detail. Like, if we look at this photo, for example. Why is this grayed out? Okay, look at this photo, for example. This light is strong enough that it's casting shadows across the person. Now, this is cool for this interaction, but often we don't want that because, like, when you can cast strong shadows, like we're saying in the middle of the day, almost that graduation cap effect, you end up not being able to see an eye. You're not able to see things that are, like, kind of big and important for that person. And so we just need to do a better job in the first, like, our first steps as photographers, identifying light and placing it in a good spot. Waiting for questions if we got them. Just retweeting this one time for the folks, so make sure they see it. Okay, so does that make sense? We want to make sure that our light is working for what we want to work. Well, what we want to do, right? We want to make sure that our light looks stunning. We want to make sure that it's reflective of our subjects, but we don't want it to be overpowering. And then I'm going to show you how you can use Lightroom in some ways to make some pivots to your lighting, even if it's not tip-top ideal. So before we start, or now that we're starting, we're looking at Lightroom. Something I want to point out over here, we have a Learn and a Discover panel. Both of these together do important things. They help you, for free, understand how Lightroom works. So, you know, if you grow tired of watching me talk to you at 9 o'clock at night, or you kind of just, you don't want to read about it, you want to learn hands-on, right? Maybe you were the kid that just loved dissecting frogs in science class, which is fine, you know, do your thing. This is for you. This is a more hands-on way for you to understand how the Lightroom tools work. So we're actually going to start with the more intense version. This is, in the Learn, these are like really detailed tutorials written by a photographer. I have a couple. I can link them if you'd like to see them. But essentially the way that they're set up, there's a before and after photo, so you can see the first photo and what happened, what they did with the edit. And you can say, oh, I like that edit. I want to see more of that, right? Or, sorry, I feel like I just in the mirror, oh boy, right? Ew, sorry, my fingers itchy. Okay, so it lets you know if it's advanced, you know, beginner, intermediate. Even if it's advanced, you can just click through it, see if you understand stuff. And if not, you can always look at it again after you've tried it. But usually you tried other things. The photographers write, you know, their ethos for why they edited the way they did, and it lets you know which tools they use the most. And so let's say you're having a hard time with color mix, or you're having a hard time with curves. We're going to click out of this for 1 second. You can go to the top here. You can go to Tools, and you can say, okay, I want to see things that use curves, right? And like these are all things that will show you the different ways you can use curves based on how this professional photographer did it. And I find that to be super helpful because what it does is it just gives you more actionable real world examples, like examples that you would see in your everyday life, photos of your pets, photos of your friends, photos of this terrifying hawk thing. Here's one for me. taking a portrait. Oh, there's a picture of Pharrell. Moat Devoid says, how do I set up my metering? Also, is it Moat? Mote? Moet? Let me know if I'm saying it properly. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Essentially, what I do when I'm setting up my metering is like, I try my best to meter and then take a couple photos and make sure it's accurate. What do I mean by that? So a light meter in your camera is that little bar that runs like on the inside. So you're looking through your camera and it'll say like, they'll have like a line and there's like a tick in the middle, 2 ticks on the right and left of that, and then 2 more ticks. The one in the middle is supposed to be perfect exposure. Now, we all know that term perfect can have issues, right? Perfect can mean perfect for whom? Because my skin is darker than, some of my friends who are white, and lighter than some of my friends who are, from different parts of the world. Sometimes the meter can be slightly off, and so I do like to test a couple times before I photograph, but generally I use the metering in my cameras. Or if I know for sure if I'm taking a silhouette or something, that I'll like stop down, meaning I'll go to the left so it says negative to a degree to make sure I get the level of detail that I want in the image. Did I answer your question, Moet? Moot? Let me know. Okay, just Moat. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's slide back over here before I forget. So here is one written by me. And I really did write this. It took a while. So if you choose to check it out, please appreciate that I took a minute to try to get it all together. So when you click through it, you see your before and after, it loads through this tutorial. And like, just like what I'm showing you today, it not only has chapters, but it has the I wrote like the initial light in this photo is lovely. So our changes will be more focused to bring out the subject's features. So there, here I'm in a studio. Here I have control of my light. This is a photo setup where there is, she's on a cyclorama is, let me just show you a photo. Oh, do I not? Oh. Sorry, I didn't realize that I'd closed my Safari window. Okay. Let me just, so y'all can see. A cyclorama is like a really, really large, a large white wall that's at a swooping angle. And it's kind of cool because what it ends up doing is it makes this illusion of depth that the photo looks much further away than it is. And so if you look at this photo, it's photographed on a cyclorama. And I can try to find some other photos from this series, but essentially she's actually standing pretty close to the wall, but because of the swoop, it looks like it's infinite. And I think that's like a good little trick for depth. So I'm in full control of the light here. I'm in full control because I'm in the studio, and you don't often get to do those things, but I have the cyclorama on one side. I have a reflector, like a V-flat reflector that is, if y'all don't know what V-flat is, it's like, I'm gonna use this iPad as an example. Okay, so V-flat is like white on one side, and then the inside, it's like black on the inside, like these two would be black. And what you do is you stand it up like this near your subject, and the white side will just provide some fill, kind of like, so if our main light is the sun coming from this side, right? Here, let me show you. Oh, I gotta zoom in more, sorry, hold on a second. Okay, so the main light's over here, right? On this left side, I have a V-flat, and light's reflecting from the main, being the sun, into here just to give some extra detail here so you can see just, the texture in her braids, or just give you a little bit more detail than you would have gotten in the first place. So, back to it. There's a V-flat, there's a light on this side. I have a main light and I have a fill, kind of like what we're doing in here right now with these two lights. Shout out to Elgato. We're in a cyclorama. Now, with that in mind, okay. Moat said, I use spot metering 90% of the time against the sky, and the brightest spot in the scene match against the subject, as the sensor has some range to use in post. Interesting. So Mo, what I normally do is I just expose for my subject unless I'm doing something really specific, like I have to make some sort of like layered image where I'm compositing things. I don't do a ton of those, but like generally, I keep my metering to, does my subject, are they exposed properly? Now, if I pointed this at my subject, you'd notice if I pointed here, it would say that this was underexposed, even if it was the right exposure, especially if it was at her hair. So just keep in mind, depending on the skin tone that you're photographing, to make sure that you're as accurate as you can be to their skin tone, and like just seeing when you photograph what happens if you listen to it or you under or overexpose it, meaning you push or pull your exposure. Any other questions? Just having a good time listening to some music, vibing with y'all, Oh, Alex said, what do you do when you, Alec Erickson, shout out to Alec, gang. Appreciate the question, my G. What do you do when you got photographer's block? Power through it, wait it out, stimulants or other? Are you the feds, bro? This sounds like you asked me if I do cocaine. I do not. I have never failed a drug test in my life. It's impossible. I'm unintentionally straight edge, but this feels like a feds question. Now then, photographer's block. So it depends, Alec. What are you trying to make, right? I think I get imposter syndrome about where I am in my career, like what I should be making, right? I just started directing. I just did a commercial a couple months ago, and it was okay, And I see some of my peers like really knocking out amazing stuff, and sometimes it's difficult for me because I know that I can do better and do more. I don't really get blocked so much as I just kind of do that thing where my mind races 100 miles a minute, and I just slow it down enough to form not only a great idea but an execution plan for it. But if I was getting blocked, if you're getting blocked, I would tell you go assist another photographer. Or if you have a pretty bad block, put down your camera for a week and try some different things. Like if you used to play basketball, go play 2 games of pickup basketball for a couple of days. Like do things that put you back into the real world, because remember, your strength as a photographer comes from your ability to observe everything around you and translate that vision into something specific, right? You're essentially like, there's a quote about something like a photographer looks at the chaos of the entire world and then finds one specific thing to translate to the viewer. Place yourself like what, maybe go people watch, like go walk around the mall or whatever. But if you have block and it's for a non-client project, then just slow down and give yourself less stress. Oh, Mo, I know you exposed for the subject. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to tell you that. I didn't think you did. Al, did that answer your question? Officer Erickson. Bro, listen, the feds is out here. Feds is, my old wife, I used to say feds is watching. Alex, you seem like a nice man. I personally do not want to go to jail. But Alex, while we're here, can you tell us about maybe your work, or like maybe you want to share a little bit of it, or if you have any other questions, or just, what brought you here? Always good to know. While we're doing that, I'm just going to kind of talk through this tutorial some more. So yeah, essentially, like, this is a good way for you to look at how professional photographers work and use these tools and why. Because I'm sure if you've used any editing tool before, Photoshop, Lightroom, Adobe Audition, Premiere, Rush, Illustrator, like there are a lot of different ways to do the same thing, right? If you look at this thing and you're like, man, I really want to see the texture on Andrew's hair more, right? Just like on a camera, if you want to brighten this so you can see the texture of my hair more, you could increase the light, you can move me closer to the light, you could bring down your shutter speed, you can bring down your aperture, you could bring up your ISO. There's like really, you can add another light, you can add a reflector. There's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. And so it's important to me that you know that. And when you use these tutorial files, you can say, oh, wow, like here are 3 photographers that I love, and each of them uses curves differently. They think about exposure differently. Personally, I don't use exposure that much, which we're going to get into in 5 minutes. Okay, let's see. Everyone all good? Alex said you felt like a tourist in spaces. Alec, have you heard the song "You're a Tourist" by Death Cab for Cutie? Essentially, the thesis of the song is when you feel like a tourist, it's time to go. Maybe this is reflective of how you feel about the space you're in. Maybe you feel like it's time for you to move on. If you haven't heard the song, it's a beautiful song. And since it's my stream, we're just going to go look at it because I do what I want. Moat says two-thirds of a stop doesn't hurt the skin tones, but there is an option for the overcast background. That's true, Moat. I definitely would underexpose. Yeah, like about a third of a stop for me, but I see the 2/3. Just because if you're photographing in RAW, you can always get that back, and it's super helpful for you. So we're looking at cycloramas, but more importantly, I think at the end of each of my streams, I should have like all the weird tabs I brought up, but I will not sing this because I have a terrible voice. But I just wanted to give you a quick second. If you feel like a tourist, I don't even know what's going on here. But yeah, those lyrics are not right. Hold on. Move along, bro. That's what it says. When there's doubt in your mind, move along. That's what I'd say. Give yourself time and space. And if you go on a vacation, or if you can't afford that, just find a different place for you to go and photograph. Or you could start back to the basics and go back to some of the first places that allowed you to photograph in the first place, and just spend a week on that one place, right? If it's a park or something, just sit in it for one day, photograph in it for one day, sit in it for another day. Like give yourself excuses to really drill down on the things that excited you about this in the first place. Let me know if that was helpful, y'all. And now we're just going to get down into, how to look at these guided tutorials. Okay, so Alec, definitely ask more questions. Alec, if you could, please retweet this because I think you're watching this from Twitter. I'm also going to grab some lotion because my hand is super ashy. Okay, let me. Okay, better off now. Thanks. Okay. Alec, I appreciate that. Hopefully you already follow me. If you don't, please do. You can find me on Twitter and on YouTube at Andre. I'm sorry, you already follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram and YouTube at Andre, Aundre. But yeah, appreciate it. Keep the energy up. Get vaccinated if you haven't got vaccinated yet. And please watch the WNBA. They kicked off tonight, or they tipped off tonight. Excuse me. Kickoff is for football and soccer. Or does the same thing, depending on the country. All right. So just gonna get through this. So the one thing I was gonna bring up is it's a guided tutorial. So it tells you like, hey, look, I slid my exposure here. That's how I did it. Then once you get to the spot, it lets you kind of see what you were doing. And it just gives you each time, hey, I'm going to darken my highlights. And obviously, as you zoom out, you can see exactly what's happening. And I'm kind of holding your hand through each step. And this is a good way for you to say, okay, how do each of these tools, these sliders in each panel work? Like, I remember when I first opened this, I was like, yo, what is the difference between exposure and shadows, highlights, and whites and blacks? Like, what does what? The only word I knew here was contrast. I wouldn't even, to this day, if someone asked me contrast, I would just say it changes the contrast. And I'm sure all of our language arts teachers would roll around in their graves at the idea that we would be defining a word with the word. But So that is how these guided tutorials work. Let me actually get to what I was supposed to get to. I'm just out here just talking. Once again, please ask questions. So these are what these learn looks like. Here's one from the homie Josh Haftel. Talks about like correcting perspective distortion. And they're all very, very different. But here, if we just skip steps, you'll see throughout it gives you a why, a how, and like works through each tool. And if it's a tool that you haven't used before and you're afraid of it, it works out. Hey, Alec, 200 followers is a lot of people. If you told me tomorrow that I could have 200 people show up somewhere, well, it's COVID. But like in 2017, if I was doing something, 200 people showed up, I'd be hyped. So thank you for sharing with 200 peoples. And please stick around and ask more questions. All right. So anyway, that's Josh's stuff. The other thing I wanted to point out here is if you hit discover, you can see a little bit less lift, like edit. So look what happens if you zoom, if you just kind of hover over a single image, it'll show you the before and after. And if you click on the image, let's pick this one by Max. It'll show you slowly each thing that they did and what happens, right? This is crazy. It's amazing. And now you can say like, oh, wow, I want to edit like Max. But instead of just saying I want Max's preset, now you're saying, oh, okay, Max edits this way. How can I edit this way? You know? And it starts with just watching. And let's say you say, oh, wait, hold on. I didn't understand. What else did he do? What did I miss? You can click back and go back to something and just click and hold and see the difference between each one. You can click and say, oh, okay. I see how he changed the purple to give it this dreamy look. I want to see how he changed the color reduction, right? Like all these things are important because little nuances help you. But for the most part, the main things you're editing are light and color. But let's say you finish this, you're like, yo, this is lit. Like I want to say this is a preset. Some people have made that an option. You can hit save as a preset. And then if you have any version of Lightroom, free, paid, you can save this in a folder or group that you make. Obviously, you see I have a million presets, but we'll keep them in my save preset folder. And it keeps the photographer's name in there, so you can follow them later if you want. It's saved. It's a really, really cool thing. Okay, Moat says, this is Lightroom CC, I guess. Does holding down Alt Option work the same way? Moat, what do you mean, what's Alt Option? What am I holding down? And yes, I'm using Lightroom cloud-based version. Oh, Alec, I bought my Visco presets a while ago, so I just imported them into Lightroom, and you can still use them. Taking a second. Dancing a little bit. Just moving a little bit. Wait and see if any more questions come in. Appreciate y'all. Dude, Alec, I appreciate the kind word. I see the retweet. I'm waiting to see what Moat was talking about before I move on, because I just want to make sure I'm being helpful. No? All right. So anyway, that's how this works. Hit save as preset. We'll do one more. Oh, and you can also follow people. I meant to say that. And if you think your edits are banging, you can submit an edit right here, and it'll show you how to do it. We'll do one more for my homie Summer Murdoch, because Summer is amazing. She is a Lightroom ambassador, big fan of her. And like Summer makes beautiful work. So you notice like you can click through the edit and say like, oh, I want to see the difference between what she did from color mix green to yellow. Like how did it change, right? And just kind of get that vibe, get that understanding. It's really, you can see the black and white mask adjusting the white and black point and so on. Moat, let me check. I don't know. I don't actually know if that's a thing. Oh yeah, you're right. You can see it. Mo just gave a really good point that if you hold Alt Option, you can see the black and white points on the image. That's amazing. It's helpful. I personally don't really use it that often, but can be super helpful. All right, so we've looked at like ways you can like learn the editing, right? Ways that you can check out what other people want to do, but we want to talk about what you want to do. If you are watching this, please comment in the chat any sort of adjective for how you want your photos to feel. I'll give you a minute, but like it could be light, it could be airy, it could be moody, it could be honest, it could be warm. Like just put those in, and then I'm going to show you how to do some of them. While I'm waiting for that, I'm just going to give you a little brief description of what the Lightroom tools do. Please, please, please. I don't want to like beg for audience participation, but it always makes everything more fun. All right, so over on the right in our edit panel in Lightroom, we have this sweet homie up here. It's a histogram. It's kind of like the math and color had a baby. So it shows you where the colors of the of all the pixels in the image, where they sit on this graph, from dark to light. Then we have the light panel. One cool thing I want to point out that Lightroom added recently is this little eyeball thing. It's really cool. You can like hide the edits, so you can see after you finish the edit, like, oh, like, you know, how does this look different if I just take away the light edits I just did? So for example, I can press it and you can just see, oh, like what changed, right? I changed a bunch of light things. And then if you change color, something similar, you could just see like what happened. Oh yeah, Alec, I appreciate that. Please DM me on Instagram because I will not open this intelligently right now. I will forget, and then the chat doesn't save. Or maybe it does save. I don't really know where it saves to, though. All right. Let's see if we had any comments. Nope. All right. So if you do choose to participate later, I just want you to write some adjectives for how you want your photos to look and feel: warm, inviting, colorful, light, bright, moody, you know, whatever. Those things can definitely work. Sorry, I hit my shoulder. Okay. Dude, appreciate you, Alec. All right, y'all. So we're looking at this photo, and we're just going to talk through what I did in the edit and how I can achieve this consistently. So let's go with this photo that's not edited at all, right? This is a photo of my friend Najee at Fort Greene Park a couple of years ago. If you're ever not sure, you know, what you did with an image, if you go down to the bottom in Lightroom, you can hit this little eye, and it'll tell you where the photo is taken, or when the photo is taken, where, if you have like a GPS log that like linked into it, it'll show you the size of the image as well as the settings. These settings are important because between what you see in the image and the settings, you can figure out what time of day it is. And like if you want to recreate a photo, it's better to do that way. So anyway, look at this photo. We're seeing it's very, very green. I think a lot of you ask me immediately, like, yo, like, how do I make a cool preset, right? Hold on. Let's talk about what we want to do to edit this singular photo, and then we're going to go backward and talk about a preset afterward. So first I look at this photo and I say, okay, like, it looks reasonably bright. I want to bring up my exposure a little bit, just a touch. I think exposure is kind of like salt, right? If you have too much, it's not helpful. And there's a lot of tools like this in Lightroom, like clarity, dehaze. Like if you use too much of anything, it'll be overpowering and it'll look like that deep fried photo of Kauai with President Obama. I don't know if y'all remember that photo. Hold on, let me show you. This deep fried photo. This is horrible. This man took this very normal photo and then did this to it. I'm upset. Sick in my brain. All right. Anyway, getting back to it. So with exposure, notice I only went up about a third of a stop. And if you want to know what does it look like, let's click that eye again and see this change. Just a touch brighter. Nothing wild, but just kind of giving us detail all over the place. And hitting this little eye close to see what happens to what the edit changed, right? So the next thing I want to say is contrast. You know, you use it to bring up contrast, but the thing I don't think anyone thinks about, or I don't think we think about enough, you can actually bring your contrast down. And sometimes with images like this one, where the subject's kind of tucked in a shadow, if you bring your contrast down a little bit, it'll help you kind of get a slightly more even image. It'll kind of neutralize those shadows a little bit in a way that might be helpful for you. Moat said neurotic filters are taking over. Yo, shout out to the 10 people that are watching this on Behance. Shout out to the 4 people watching on Twitter and the 2 on Facebook, the 5 on Twitter now. I appreciate y'all. If you have any questions, please feel free to pepper them in. Shout out to Stanford and Brent for watching over on Facebook. It really means a lot that y'all are taking time to, kind of support me. And also, if you have questions, like please ask them. This is a much better chat, a much better stream. If y'all just let me know, what you're thinking, what you need, etc. All right. So anyway, let's get back to this. So we brought our contrast down. Now I'm going to answer a couple of questions. What are the differences between highlights and shadows? Remember, you can see them over here. Why do you need to know this? You need to understand this because depending on the type of day, depending on the light for that day, understanding how you want to use highlights and shadows will make a big difference. So obviously I took this photo in the middle of the day. You can tell because the sun is high in the sky. I tucked my subject into a tree for a nice even shadow. But if you look over here, you see this super bright spot. There's no detail here. Like if you don't believe me, look what happens where I bring my exposure all the way down. Even if I bring my exposure all the way down, there's no detail there. That's how bright it is. It's super overblown. Zoom in even more to show you. There's not even a line for like a staircase or whatever. So also real quick, I went over here and did this. If you ever do an edit you don't like on a slider, you can just double tap the circle and it'll go right back to where it was. Remember that Lightroom is non-destructive, which means as you edit, you don't have to worry about making a mistake and then being like, it's done that way forever. It's not. It's not like when we were kids and like let Microsoft Word would crash when you're typing and then you lose that work forever. You're good. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And if we are, then we'll keep going. Okay, so highlights is this thing that we're looking at right here. The reason why I'm saying that for consistency, you want to make sure that you say to yourself, okay, every time I photograph at high noon is when the sun is the highest in the sky at noon. Sorry, forgot that I'm out of the frame. I'm like doing my Kareem Abdul-Jabbar impression. Sun is the highest in the sky, right? You want to make sure that the light is that if you tuck your subject into this, that you edit it very similarly so that no matter what you do, you can keep that consistent style. So for example, when I was in college, I was photographing a lot of graduation photos for money, right? So like every fall, every spring, I was taking graduation photos, and I only took them at sunrise block and sunset block. So what that meant was like, I was taking people to the similar spots, and so when I was editing, even then when I didn't know how to use Lightroom, I was using Photoshop Actions. I was getting similar edits, right? Obviously, I had to make some skin tone tweaks, but I was essentially like working on the presumption that I was gonna be kind of making like a factory of photos. Like they're gonna look really similar. We're gonna go on like a similar route. And so, you know, if you are trying to establish that consistency after you've made your light, the next thing you want to do is you want to establish, you know, you want to establish if you're going to photograph in a certain way, how are you going to edit? I forgot I had to keep these up to date because I know people are reading. Oh yeah, Moat said there's a modifier key to set one slider to auto guess. Yeah, there is. I don't ever use the auto. Auto essentially, like, based on how folks edit, it takes photos and it what's the word? It takes photos. It like they fed it a bunch of photos in Lightroom, like photos edited by me, photos by other people, just to teach it how people edit, so that when you hit auto, which you can find up here, it'll edit. Like if we tap auto, we'll see based on like what it thinks someone would do. I personally don't love auto, and that's fine. You know, when I was photographing very early with my camera, I used auto a lot, and so then I used AV being aperture priority and TV being shutter priority a lot. And I did that just so I was just starting to understand what aperture was doing, what shutter speed was doing, and why I wanted to do it. You know, so I won't yuck anyone's yum. Like, do your use auto when you can, but we do streams like this, so you can know. We do streams like this so you can know your why. Like if you do use auto, what are you looking for? What changes are being made, and why do you like it? Why do you care about it, etc. And once again, this week I did an article with Wired about how to take great photos, headshots and self-portraits of yourself with your phone. And if you are curious about that link, please write it in the comments. I had written it earlier, but if you just came in, I can put it again if anyone wants to see it. And right now, we're just talking about developing consistent style, but we're touching on exposure, highlights, and shadows. And I'm also jamming a little bit. Just kind of in a good mood. It's a Friday, you know. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, please do. It'll help you out, I promise. It'll help us all out. And if you have time after this or during this, put on a WNBA game. It's the tip-off of the season. Just retweeting this again so the folks can see it. All right, we're going to get back to it again. Okay, so let's get back to this. All right, so the difference between highlights and shadows and exposure is pretty simple. Highlights and shadows are more precision tools. Exposure raises the brightness and the darkness of a single image, or excuse me, of all the pixels in the image. Exposure is like a hammer, right? And you don't always need a hammer. Notice we brought it up to bring everything up, but let's say that we know that over here and on his shirt, some of our highlights are maybe too bright or too dark. we can just change it. So pay attention to this image, how when I slide highlights up, the whole image doesn't go anywhere, right? Look at what happens to his shirt, and I'll zoom in and show you. The best way to know if it's too much for the shirt is, can we see any detail? Like here in the shirt, we're seeing these like folds on the edges. We're also seeing like the texture of the cotton or whatever. But if we overexpose it, we can't see that anymore. So I personally am just going to bring it up a little bit to get a little brightness in there. And then with shadows, shadows can be like anything in shadows, darker edges. So here in his hair, even here, these darks in here. And so if I bring my shadows down, look what happens to his hair. You lose that texture. You're losing, what you can see in his hair. And if we want to change that, we want to bring these shadows up. And just so you see what I mean, just to clarify, remember that shadows, when you go plus on shadows, it doesn't mean you're adding shadows. Plus always means adding light. So just remember that. When you go negative on shadows is when there's more shadows. I realize that's confusing. So if you slide both directions, if you increase your shadows, you want to go negative. If you want to increase your highlights, you want to go positive. It's a little weird, but just something to remember. Like hitting plus means less shadows. Cool, does that make sense? Moat says I shoot manual all the time except birds. What does that mean? You photograph a lot of birds, Moat? What kind of birds are you talking about? I'm like nervous. Also, I think I'm going to start streaming earlier in the day. It's kind of confusing because I don't really understand when folks want to be on exactly, but I want to make sure that I'm being helpful for folks, but also not at a time that interrupts someone trying to do other work. All right. So once again, highlights and shadows. As you increase your highlights, they get brighter. If you increase your shadows, they get brighter. You decrease your highlights, they get darker. Decrease your shadows, they get darker. That also goes for whites and blacks and your exposure. Kind of everything in this category. Contrast works a little differently because it increases the contrast of the whites and blacks if you pump your contrast up. And then if you are decreasing your contrast, it starts to gray everything out. And I can show you what that looks like right now. Just giving you a little Friday dance to make sure you keep that energy up. All right, so look at this difference as we're reducing our contrast. See how it's flattening the image out? It's kind of graying it out. Versus in the other direction, it's increasing the contrast in the lights and darks of the photo. You can see it in the darks, the hair we talked about, here in the shadow of the leaves, here on a shirt, here over here that we discussed in these leaves. All right, anyway. We kind of got in a good spot. This is kind of how we want to photograph this going forward. Mo, can you tell me what kind of birds you photograph? Mo, also, where do you live? Where are you checking out birds and stuff, my G? All right. So consistently, we know that this is how we want to edit. If we're photographing someone in the middle of the day, high noon in a shadow. Now, let's have some fun with it. We're going to skip curves for this time. We're going to go straight down to color grading. And this is kind of the thing that I wanted to talk the most about today. So this is the tool that replaced split toning. And so for some folks who are like, okay, wait, hold on. Okay. This is three circles with circles inside of them and a line underneath. What does it mean? Okay. The way that an image is constructed, let me go back to my regular face first. The way that an image is constructed mathematically on the histogram, that thing I showed you before that was all the points and stuff, because we all love calculus. The way that it's constructed there are three phases of it. Oh, sorry, I shook my desk. There are, excuse me, the shadows and the highlights, which you already know, and there are the midtones, right? And so the best way to describe it is you look at me right now in this in this video that you're seeing. A video is several images all at once. A video is like 24 frames a second or so, 24.97, I think, right? Right behind me, these white walls, they're highlights. My hair in this situation is a shadow. Shadows on the edges here where you can't see. Midtones, everything else. This painting from my friend Caitlin Heber in college, shadow. This Iron and Wine poster from college, shadow. I mean, sorry, midtone. Midtone. Midtones take up most of the image, right? And so when we start to look at color grading, we're going to have the option of changing the tint and the coloring, the mood of each of these things. Our shadows, our highlights, and our midtones. And so I thought it'd be important for you to kind of see it here with me so I can show you how you can play with it to make a lot of really cool and weird and interesting effects. Anyway, back to the screen. Oh. Oh, no. Mo, I'm sorry about the lag with the chat. I know, it can be frustrating. I wish it was a little bit more live. Mo, do you follow me on Twitter or Twitch? If you do, then maybe the chat will be a little bit faster. I'm not really sure. Mo, if you Twitter and Twitch, it's Andre Leroux. I'll put it in the chat. It's Andre Leroux. And maybe see if the comments will come in me faster. I don't know. Okay, so we're in color grade. We want to give like a kind of sweet tint to this. We want to give it a mood, right? Remember I said midtones are most of the image. The midtones of this image are like here on his face, here, maybe this is a little bit more highlights. These are shadows. A lot of these are midtones. So when we select the color for the midtone, we're essentially selecting the color for the whole image. So I don't like to do that first. I actually like to go with the least dominant thing. So shadows in this image. So notice I'm just getting a little tint in here, a little bit of mood. Notice how as I get further, it gets more intense. So that's your first principle of how color grading works. So just like with anything in Lightroom, if you double tap that circle, it'll go back to regular. There's also this little eyeball that means if we click on it, we can see what our recent edit did and if we're better off without it. For the indecisive folks in the world. Okay, so this is what happens. You see as I linger, as I hover over this circle and I pull it, you'll see that these three letters with numbers next to them pop up, H, S, and L. For folks that have watched this before, they know that generally the way color grading works and coloring in Photoshop and Lightroom, it works on three principles: hue, saturation, and luminance. So hue is what is the hue of the color. Like, what does the color look like? How does it register on the color spectrum? Like, notice as I take this and drag this, as the number changes, right? You get close to white, and it gets all the way down, like closer to 0 for the hue. So here, like right here is 0. Then obviously this way is 356, 354. The hue is, really like a hyper specific way to choose the color. If you ever looked at, or you took a CSS class in college or in high school, or you were just smarter than me and took it in middle school, you know that like there's really specific HTML colors or hex colors. It's kind of a similar concept, right? So moving around the circle in a circular fashion, you're changing your hue. You're changing what color you're selecting. But if you notice as I'm clicking, sometimes this line's coming up. That line's saying if you start to pull further from the center, the intensity or the saturation of the color is going to change. See how it goes all the way up to 100 for the S? Right? So I don't want to keep it all the way up there. Let's get it closer to this number. I'm going to zoom out. Right? And so you can see here in the shadow that there's a little bit of a tint of purple. Don't believe me? Let's turn this eyeball off again so you can see. See, there's just a little slight cast of purple that's kind of run through, right? It's kind of a fun way to start. Like, I like color grading because although it's complex, if you play with it, it'll be very responsive to you, and it's a really like calming and fun way for you to start to get a consistent coloring of your images without impacting the image as a whole. What I mean by that is like, okay, too often when we're editing, we will go over to temperature and tint over here that are basically the white balance tools, and we'll say, oh, we want it to be warmer, and we'll like make it warmer this way, right? And then later, as we're going to talk about, we'll copy and paste these edits to another image, but the light will be different, right? If you were to take a photo of me right now, here in this room, and you edited the photo, and then you use that same edit on something else, if you kept the same white balance and exposure, the person would look too bright or too dark, and they would look really, really the wrong color. So let me get back to that now. Oh, that's too big. That's small. I wish we could swap these. Oh, sorry. I just accidentally made a full screen. That's terrifying. Okay, we're good. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? I know we're having a good time, but I just want to make sure that I'm not just like talking into the void and making you feel uncomfortable asking questions. All right. So we set our color grade, right? We set this for our shadows. Now, the next thing I get a question on is like, what is this bottom line? So we talked about our hue, we talked about our saturations. Remember, to change our hue, we just move our circle in a circular motion around. And to change our saturation, we move our circle in a linear way, right? To make the color more intense. What happens with the luminance? How do you change that? That's how normally when we do color mix, we can change our hue, our saturation, our luminance in 3 different sliders. How do we do it here in color grading? Right down here. You can choose how bright or dark you want to make this color. Now look, as we pull it, you see that you can reduce the luminance in a negative way, or you can add brightness to the color. And it has to be kind of weird. You're like, wait, what's going on? What you're saying is, I'm going to choose how bright or dark I want my shadows to be with this color tint to them. So let's see. Now, all of a sudden, my shadows are a touch darker, but they're also more purple. It's kind of like a fun little, it's like if you were to mix the shadow tool that we looked at already with a color cast, you get what you're doing here in color grading. It's kind of a fun way for you to kind of bake a color into your mood. Like, let's say you want the photo to be a little bit darker, but like maybe it'll translate better the mood that you're looking for if you can include a color in that. Like, color impacts our mood so much. And so color grading gives us the opportunity to do this. Hold on, I'm going to get the edit. Oh, God. One second. Now we can go to this photo. Like, for example, this is what I did. I just wanted to make a little edit that felt like cross-processing, like you were doing film. And essentially you can say, I want to increase my highlights, I want to increase my shadows. But the color grading tool is really, really fascinating because you can inject color into those decisions. And then you can start to say, how can I make the image feel really ethereal? And like the best way to describe it is you all have watched films before. Some of your favorite films are heavily edited. I just watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, and it's like, for better or for worse, a masterclass in coloring an image, right? Or coloring a video. Also, like Book of Eli with Denzel Washington, like all of them do specific things. Like in that movie, there are these intense brights, and they're like a little blown out, and they're also like a little blue. So everything feels futuristic. It feels cold, right? Consistency starts after you've established your light. Actually, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to change this thing. Yo, what's up, Philbert? How you doing? There's a global option too in mobile. It's so powerful. Yeah, dude, Mo, you're right. It is really, really powerful. Mo, there is a global option here also. It's all the way here on the right. It's right here. So it lets you change everything. I don't personally like to do that. It feels scary. Global option, what Moat is saying is it allows you, it's like the concept of global versus localized. So global being like macroeconomics, like, global market, stock market, versus like localized being you go buy Gatorade from your local bodega, Walmart, Publix, whatever. So it's just a different effect. All right. So we looked at one color grade. Let's play with another one. I love also that I do these tests and then later I'm like, who did this edit? It was me. I feel like that was in a movie where he's like, I wanted to know it was me. Only I could be editing my own photos, really. So anyway, let's get to it. Let's do this photo also in the park, and I'm going to kind of bring up something about consistency here. So one cool thing about Lightroom, there are many, but you can hit Command-C, or you can hit Copy on your phone. But if you Command-C, this thing pops up and says Copy Edit Settings. That means you can take an edit that you made, and you can paste it on something else. And some of you were like, yeah, that's a preset. Yeah, we're getting to that. Easy. So I think this is actually kind of cool. It has like a weird film feel, it feels distant, partially because I think he's a little out of focus. And the kind of competing red, purple, and green look is like kind of a fun one. But the thing I want to bring up to you is, as you're editing, let me bring my face back up for this. As you start to change between photos and copy edits, whether it's through presets or just this copy and paste feature, you want to make sure that your color, not color grading, you want to make sure that your exposure, your contrast, your white balance, whether it's tint or temperature, are specific to each image. Why? Because these photos were taken in the same park, not on the same day, but let's take that same edit we just made and let's put it in a completely different light area. Let's find something that's really dramatically different so you can see what happens when you don't account for the proper white balance. Okay, here's a photo of my friend Sadiq for a podcast that he has with Spotify called Resistance. And let's hit paste. You see how, sorry. I just realized that you're looking at my face. You can't see what I'm talking about. Okay, let's hit paste. This is the image of Sadiq that I turned into Spotify for them to hype up his show. We're going to paste. It's a completely different look. Now, it could be a good look, but here for him, since he's a dark-skinned man, darker skinned than Najee is, you see how the edit that I made doesn't work for him. But these are both outdoor photos. And yes, the time of day is different, but the light is somewhat similar. What if we did an indoor photo? Let's take this photo of my friend Addis in the subway and add this in. Can you see how bad that is? I don't think y'all. Let me show you how bad this looks. You see this? My man looks orange. This is how we start to make some of these mistakes and make black people, brown skinned people, literally anyone that isn't white start to look crazy. We have to make sure that when we're photographing folks, and then when we're editing folks, that we don't fall in love with the copy and paste or the preset, especially ones that alter the tint and alter the exposure, because you're not, without realizing it, especially if you're going between two different skin tones of people, there are subtleties that you need to have with your edit. So consistency starts with light, or starts with observing your environment, then you go to light, and then after that, it's observing your edit. Now, let's say you're like, well, how am I supposed to know that? It's a lot of information. No. What's up, Vikram? What's going on? Dude, Mo, I love how much energy you have, man. It gives me a lot of life. Dancing a little bit. So you're asking, like, how should I know these things? This is so much information. Okay. Let's pause. How many of y'all know what this is? Oh, sorry. Dude, shout out to Addis coming on when I had his face on here. You are hilarious, bro. Yo, shout out to Addis. Yo, gang, Addis Clopton, gang. Dude, appreciate you coming. Les Smitten said, would you just uncheck the exposure and tint box and copy settings? Yes, you would, Les Smitten, and I'm getting there immediately. Les Smitten, thank you for asking that question. Please do me a favor and retweet on Twitter if you're watching it there. Anyone watching on Facebook or Twitter or Twitch, please share. Addis, yes, perfect timing. I promise I've only showed one photo of you in the stream, and you came on right when it came on. All right, so this is a color card, y'all. What does it do? It shows you colors, and they're printed, and they are accurate. So when you photograph something, like if I photograph this photo of Addis, let me bring it back up. If I have this photo of Addis, and I say to myself, I don't know, does that look like how he's supposed to look? If I photographed a picture of this color card, then I could go to that initial photo and edit from that and ask myself if I had changed the white balance too much. Yo, what's up, Vikram? Appreciate that. I appreciate everyone coming in the chat. I love that, like, streaming is funny. You can stream for like an hour and it could be bad quiet, and then like mad people pop in with a pew, 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 pew. Or as a Jamaican, the brr. Anyway. Addis, what we need to do is we need to start debuting some of your new music on this stream. Let me know if you're into it. Okay, that's color card. Now let's get back to our editing. Shout out to Akram. Shout out to Addis Clopton. If you don't know Addis Clopton, he's the homie. He's the space you're looking at right now. If you'd like to see more photos of him, you can follow me on Instagram, or you can follow Addis on Instagram. You know, Addis Jarrell Clopton, you know, local musician, you know what I'm saying? You know, beautiful man, usually rocking a beard. So what happens if we don't like this edit? We're going to undo paste settings so that I can actually see what this man is supposed to look like. Oh, sorry. This is the edit of Addis that makes sense, right? How do we know? Because my man doesn't look orange. And because the lighting source in here looks white. Remember that our eyes, when we only have one light source, our eyes see it as white generally. Because our eyes are super smart. Cameras are not as smart as our eyes are. Cameras are designed to be like our eye. Lenses are designed to be like our eye. So you want to have consistency in your edits. You want to make sure that your white balance is right. How do you know? You can go down here to color, which is a panel underneath light. You can tap white balance selector, and you click something. Or excuse me, let me actually have Lightroom explain it to you. It said you click a neutral color. I always click white. Let me pick hold on. So what happens is you select a point that's supposed to be white, and what will happen is Lightroom's algorithm, or Lightroom, like how Lightroom works, will say, okay, if that's supposed to be white, then this is what the rest of the image is supposed to look like. It's kind of like an amazing tool, and it helps you in case you didn't photograph in RAW, or you didn't you copy and pasted something in the wrong place and you really altered what the white balance is, which can be really, really dangerous. Without realizing it, altering white balance can do so many things, inadvertent things you didn't mean. So let's say you want to copy and paste this edit. How do you do it without making it difficult to paste on a photo that has different lighting in the future? You hit Command Copy. Oh. And notice that Command Copy doesn't really do anything for you. So instead, you want to go down to Presets. And presets, if you're not sure, if you hadn't heard of them, presets are saved edits that you can use on other edits. So instead of just copying and pasting for this session of your editing, you can save them. And you can see I have a million, but we'll go through some presets that I have here. I make a lot for streams and then also for like other things that I sell or people are curious about. And so you see as we go through, like one cool thing about Lightroom is as you hover over it, it'll show you how the edit's different. And you notice that as you look at these edits, it's changing some things in the photo, but for the most part, you're seeing that he isn't looking like super off or super weird or super like wrong. That's because generally what I like to do with my presets is I don't change my temperature and my tint, and I don't change my exposure. So let's say we want to make this edit of Addis a preset. We're going to hit these three dots here, which like universally means like, let's ask more. We're going to hit Create Preset. Drinking wine with gum is like a terrible idea. I don't know what I was thinking. Moat says, do you ever use the picker tool to select 18% gray to set the white balance? No, so Moat, I almost always use the white balance tool or the color picker tool to select the whitest part of the image. Okay, so here, I have this group called Arabella Test Class. Don't pay attention to that. What LeSmitten was so intelligently said was here, instead of just copying everything blindly, you can go through and you can decide which things are copied. So I never copy exposure, contrast, highlights, or shadows, because those vary so wildly between settings, between images, between backgrounds, between what's happening, right? And so instead, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the edits on these presets or on my images in general are altering the color to affect the mood, right? And focusing on altering the color, that will be you can always control your color. Light is not always something you can control. And so if you have a preset that alters light, you're going to spend so much time afterward always changing it. By unclicking this, what it means is if you make an exposure edit early with your if you make an exposure edit and then you apply the preset, it won't reset that exposure edit, which is super annoying when that happens. Also, I never have geometry on or optics. Optics basically makes changes based on the focal length of the camera you're using. Focal length meaning like if you think that's a word that doesn't apply to you, remember. LeSmitten, I'm chewing Take 5 Peppermint Cobalt. Why? Do you have a favorite kind of gum? Also, LeSmitten, thank you for asking questions and having helpful comments. If you could, please make sure you follow me on Twitter and or please retweet this so other folks can find it. I'm still trying to make sure I grow my audience all over the place. And as another shout out, in the next month and a half to 2 months, I'm going to be launching a Patreon that has weekly photo tips, homework, and challenges. So if you're curious in that, please DM me your email and I will add you to the list of folks that I will put on the beta of this preset. Excuse me, of this Patreon. Quick thing about the focal length. Focal length is like we all have phones, and some of our phones have 3 lenses or 2 lenses. Each one of these phone lenses, each one of these phone lenses is a different focal length. There's like a 52, like a 26, and a 13. Those are really just the distances that between the camera and the subject. But depending on the focal length, it has different effects on distortion on what you're capturing. Shout out to Behance, folks. Vikram, you are not late. Once again, everyone, if you have questions, please ask them questions. We are all better off because of it. All right, let's get back to it. Also, if for whatever reason you don't follow me on Twitter, it's just at Andre. All right. So we've gotten to this point. We talked about our color grading. We've talked about our highlights, talked about our shadows. We talked about how to establish this consistency, right? This is our culmination. This is us making a preset that we can use again in the future. A preset that is not bound by the subject. Excuse me. Well, that's not true. A subject that's not bound by the light in the environment. One that you can use as the starting point for your edits, that you can use again and again and again, and you can make tweaks from. A preset is always a good way to establish consistency, but after you paste a preset or you use a preset on an image, you can always make tweaks, right? Someone might know you because you like really accurately capture black and brown skin. Someone might know you because your photos look really surreal. Someone might know you because your photos look really real, that they like sit on the New York Times, something like that. And if that style speaks to you, then you need to figure out ways to continue to maintain it and to reveal it to others with consistency. And like what that means is like being able to establish a kind of a color language for your images that makes sense, right? If we slide over here, and you look at my images, you're seeing a lot of really similar things. Even though these are completely different subjects, you're seeing like this soft warmth. You're seeing this little reflection of a rainbow here. And here it's a much brighter, but there's a lot of energy. The photos still feel like they're related to each other. There's like not only an honesty, but a depth and a use of black point. And that's kind of one of the things I always do in my images. Although I photograph black people, and although I definitely want to make sure that I'm getting detail in this person's hair, I can see the texture, right? I'm making sure that the black point is strong enough that it still looks like it's supposed to. Even here, I always have a little bit flatter highlights and strong use of black. And you can see it. We're using it all through here in all these images. Right? So this is what I mean by consistency. Like, I'm not just teaching you a class for my own edification. It's like me trying to translate my vision and ethos for how I edit, and just helping you understand that it's not about editing like me or like another person. It's about finding what you like, using discover and learn files to practice, and then what was I going to say? And then taking what you know and applying it. So then Moat said, optical correction makes sense if a person is snapped at a really wide angle. Otherwise, it's okay unless one wants sharpness. Yeah, I don't put optical correction on unless I know exactly what it's trying to do, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like making edits and like, what's I going to say? I don't want to be making edits and then not realize that something's on and it's changing my image in a way that I'm not like sure of, if that makes sense. Any questions, y'all? If you're wondering what I'm listening to and I'm dancing to, I'm jamming to I Need a Girl Part 2 by P. Diddy. It's a fun song to dance to. I always like listen to things softly in the background that just keep my energy up because it feels weird. I don't know if y'all realize it, but I'm mostly talking to myself here and then like reading what you say. So if you have any questions, thoughts, I appreciate Moat for being super vocal, Liz Smitten for being vocal, Addis for being vocal. If you have anything you're curious about, please ask it. We are much better off when folks are active in the chat. All right, so anyway, we make the preset. Let's save this one and call it Addis. I also turn off my sharpening, but I don't really use sharpening that much. We're gonna hit save, and then let's take this preset Addis and let's see what happens. We place it on someone else, right? In theory, since we didn't change exposure and we didn't change temperature, we should be able to edit another photo, and it shouldn't make wholesale changes that are not color related, right? So we're gonna go to presets down here. Tap presets. We're going to go up to Arabella test class, which is the group I was looking at. We're going to hit add us. And now you're like, whoa, this is super blue. Yeah. Because what I forgot to do was I forgot to turn off my white balance. So we're going to hit update. Now we're going to go back to add us. See? Now it works. So that consistency, understanding your color, understanding your light, these are super, super helpful in how you work. And if you accidentally paste your temperature and your tint, then you are worse off and your consistency is worse off because of it. This is a good time to stop and say, this is a good time to remind everyone, if you are curious about how to take better photos of yourself with your phone, I have an article that I was in this week on Wired, and I can give you the link if you're curious. Just simply ask for it. Okay, let's see. Comments are good. Comments are clean. Okay. So we've talked about, setting our presets, being smart about them. What do we want to do next? All right, so here's a series of images that can really talk about our consistency. So obviously this is a studio environment. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to edit one of these photos from scratch. And then we're going to talk about, actually, I want to use that one as an example. So let's save for this one. Okay. I'm going to edit a photo from scratch. And then we're going to talk about what I see, why I did it the way I did, and how this can be translatable to other images. So first, something that Lightroom does that's really helpful is because it's non-destructive, it gives you the opportunity for you to edit in a couple different ways and keep all those edits saved. So you don't have to edit one in black and white, export it, edit one hella saturated and bounce, anything like that. You don't do that. So you want to go down here in this bottom right corner, hit versions. And here, obviously, there's the original version. And then there's the edit I made. So I'm going to create a new version that's called Streaming Test Edit. So I know that that's the one I can go back to. We're going to go back to our original. We're going to work. Okay, so first and foremost, if you notice, there are these little specks in here. That's because the camera I was shooting at that time had some hair on the sensor, I think. And I forgot to clean it off before I photographed this, which is a big problem. So I'm going to immediately, instead of going to the edit panel, I'm going to go over to the healing brush, little Band-Aid on me. And I'm going to get rid of these joints with some relative ease. And basically what I'm doing is I pick a part of the image to source from, being like, okay, so y'all see this area? This is where the hair was. And then over here is where I'm sourcing from. So basically it's saying, take this area and place it here, right? So let me show you again. I'm just going to paint over this spot. And then I'm going to source from right here. So now all of a sudden this disappears. Do it one more time for this spot. Now his hair's gone. Don't believe me? Oh, sorry. If you don't believe me, let's go back to this edit. We'll hit before. You see these hairs come up? See them disappear. If you're having a hard time finding the spots, you can hit this little switch right here that says visualize spots. And essentially it puts everything in black and white and shows you where everything is. And you can even change the threshold of this. So like you saw the spots that I selected right here, that pulls those hairs out that are like clearly textured and that are off with the pixels. It's just kind of a good way for you to say, oh, wow, like I didn't realize this was here. These things matter if you're going to be, you know, making something that's on a billboard or something that's going to be seen really blown up at a really big level. Okay, Moat says, Andre, your stream will inspire to get people started quickly, and those will inspire many, many more. Ain't no photo stream about showing personalities. I retouched photos for family photos for 70 years, and they had a consistent look. They were taken by a photographer for love. Fair? Wait, Moat, you're over 70? Wow. What's up, Vikram? You good? Any questions from the homies? Everybody good? Yeah, these old Bad Boy songs hit like... They hit like... I know the new J. Cole came out, but I take pride in watching things like listening to things hella behind everybody else. Oh, JR's here. Oh, sorry. JR only refers to Jr, otherwise known as the less Brooklyn version, or excuse me, less Bronx version of Yer. All right. Let me get back to this edit. Y'all are being interesting. All right. So I got rid of those spots. Next thing up is you see that I took a much wider photo for a photo that I lit in this area. And the way you can tell is, you notice the edges are darker. So the first thing I want to do is maybe bring my shadows up. So you see how if I bring my shadows up, it makes everything too bright? We don't like that. We're going to double tap the circle, come back. Yo, JR, Mr. Miller, how you doing, bro? How come you ain't hire me for no Google jobs, B? What's up? Now, for everyone that's curious, JR is one of the many reasons why I am where I am today. We work together as resident assistants or resident advisors in college, or RAs, for students to make sure that they were safe and cared for. And then he was the social media manager for Groove Shark. Shout out to Groove Shark. Everyone remembers what it is. And JR hired me out of college to be his intern. And that's where I learned that photographers can do other things besides work for newspapers. And he taught me how to write some copy. He taught me a lot of really specific things. Oh, shout out to this one little dread I have that I need to cut. Oh, wrong side. But yeah, without JR, wouldn't be here. So shout out to the homie. Oh, Moat said the photos are 50 plus. Bro, I was so thrown, Moat. I thought you said you were over 70. I was like, you are a very tech savvy 70 plus year old. Okay, get back to this. All right, so we want to get these edges cleaned up. How do we do that? We saw what happened, and we brought our shadows up. So obviously, if we do our exposure, you'll see that we expose everything evenly. We don't want that. And we saw when we brought our shadows up, it was exposing Janelle also. We don't want that either. So how do we get an even more localized edit? Do we just poke at the camera? How do we do it? We hit this little boy, hit our brush, or we hit B on the keyboard. Same thing. Makes me think of who is JR? Sounds like a great man to get married with. Sinful Wolf, I don't know who you are, but you should. I mean, I don't know if JR is single, but I mean, if he's into it, you should say what's up. JR is great. I'm a big fan. I'd marry JR if I could, but he won't let me. All right, so the way that the brush works is you hit plus to make a new brush. You see that it's like hella small. So you just hit these bracket keys to make it bigger. So y'all see this. The way that the brush works is actually pretty interesting. So the plus in the middle is like the center of the brush. And this inner circle is where the brush is the strongest. The outer circle is where it's a little weaker in those edges. It's called a feather. So essentially what that means is like, if this is the brush here, right? Everything in that immediate little circle that it's doing is strong, but the edges of it aren't as strong. The reason for that is it kind of helps you paint in a little bit easier. What's up, Sinful Wolf? Appreciate you. Sinful Wolf, if you can, make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Also, my name is @Andre on Instagram and Andre Leroux on Twitter. It's pretty easy to find me. That is only if you find what I'm saying to be very helpful or interesting. If you don't, you can bounce. The photos are over 70. Mo, I appreciate you. You can be as old as you want to be. As long as you keep coming back, I appreciate the energy, my G. Vikram, do you have any questions? I appreciate the comments that you're throwing out there. JR, appreciate the good vibes. All right. So basically what I'm saying is what you can do is you can paint parts of the image, right? So we're going to just select this part, and you can't see it right now, but if I toggle O, you'll see that I painted in this region, right? And we're going to do it for all, or let's do it for the top edges now so you can see what happens, right? We hit O again so it disappears. And now let's bring our shadows up. And so this allows you to do the same thing you were doing in the main edit, but only in one little zone, right? We're going to hit O again, and now it's gone. So now let's look at the differences. See how we can darken it? And so it looks a little unnatural, so we're just going to paint it in some more, right? And so it looks all the same. Sinful, I appreciate that. Sinful Wolf. Sinful Wolf, what is a sinful wolf? What exactly should a wolf be doing normally, and what leads them to sin? I mean, because they eat stuff and have sex with stuff, because that's like the animal kingdom and whatever. So I will say on the screen, this looks a little bit more intense than it's supposed to on my screen. Let me bring my shadows down a little. But you see, like now, if you look at the before and after, look at the edges. Look how they're just a little bit more natural, right? So let's continue that and just kind of paint in these corners around where Janelle is. And now we just have something that looks a little bit better. So we can start our edit and have everything be a little closer to what we're envisioning for it as we work. Does that make sense? Once again, I appreciate everyone for sticking around. I think I'm only going to be streaming for like another 20 minutes or so. So if you have questions, get them in now. Also, Vikram, Moat, Sinful Wolf, anyone else listening that's curious, I am launching a Patreon. And if you'd like to be part of the beta, please let me know. It will have weekly tips and homework. It should be pretty fun. So let's get in. Sinful Wolf said, don't tell me I had this name when I was a kid. Apparently you were like super into wolves, which I can appreciate. Maybe you were a Digimon fan? If anyone watched Digimon, shout out to Garurumon and Where Garurumon, and more importantly, Metal Garurumon. I'm embarrassed that I said that. I said that without, or I butchered the man's name. All right. So, consistency. We're going to bring our exposure up a little bit, contrast down a little, because I just want to flatten it out a little. Oh, sorry. I'm actually still in my adjustment brush. I made a mistake. Let's click out of here. All right. Bring our exposure up a little bit, exposure, contrast down a little. You can see the sliders here, what I'm doing. It's a pretty bright photo, so I'm actually going to bring my shadows up, shadows down a little, and my highlights up a little bit. And then just before I do anything else, I'm going to increase my dehaze and my clarity. Dehaze, I can do some kind of fun things. So some kind of work through this and talk to you about what I'm thinking. Next over here, color grading. Overall, I want my shadows to look just a little different. And so what I'm doing is sometimes when I'm doing my edits for color grading, what I'll do is here, let's click on this so you can see. So you see this little change, look at her skin. Essentially what I'm doing is, and this is, you just hopped in. Remember what happens with the color grading is you can move around the circle and that'll change the hue. It'll change the color. And it's not more than the color because as you change the hue like 301 is different than 308. And it's just a little closer to another color. So like, you know, blue that's 176 versus, you know, 173. The 173 is closer to green, whereas this is closer to pink. It's just a different look. So the way that the color grading works, obviously, is you pull it out, and as you move it in a circular way, you can change the hue. When you move it in a linear way, you change the saturation of the color. So how deep and saturated the color is versus how often you see it, or excuse me, versus which color you see when you look at it. So anyway, I added a little bit of blue to the shadow because this image is so warm. Because it's almost the exact opposite of this highlight. So now let's look at kind of this little thing I did. I add a little bit of orange. And so now I can go back, add some contrast, a little bit of exposure there. And lastly, I'm going to add a little bit more clarity. So let's look at our before and after. If we see her face specifically, it's a little bit bluer. Now, I think it might be a little bit too, too much clarity because if you look at her face, you can see that you're starting to see like a little pilling around like her natural forehead wrinkles and like whatever tiny blemishes she might have because she's a human being. And so what I want to do instead is just want to bring my clarity down. And then, because I included that little bit of bright shadow, I just want to make sure that, blue shadow, I just want to make sure that I'm doing a good job of not overpowering her. So what I did is I added a little orange to the midtones. And remember, the midtones in the image are most of the image. The highlight is the brightest parts. Vikram asked if I'm drinking black coffee. Vikram, this is wine, bro. I'm having a great time. Okay. So what I was saying was, let me make sure I'm clear. Okay. If you look at me right now, right? The walls are bright. They're my highlights. Even these little spots in my forehead that are a little bit brighter because I'm obviously pointing myself toward the light that I have. They're a little bit brighter. Then in my hair or even down where the planets are, these are some shadows, a little bit darker, but the midtones are most of the image. So the thing that I would be most careful of when I'm editing, I'm just going to stand up for a second, my legs are tired. The thing I'd be most careful of when I'm editing is making sure on color grading that I don't overpower my midtones because so much of the photo is midtones. So back to it. All right. Oh, as a quick side note, I have an orange hoodie on because I need to buy the WNBA hoodie. But remember, the WNBA is back tonight, and you need to watch some games. If you are a basketball fan, you are missing out. Watch these WNBA games. These ladies is talented, and they got the wild shooting motion. Them girls is just, them women are very good. They would not only wash me. Anyone that says they can be a WNBA player that is not a professional basketball player, and even some of them don't know what they talk about. These women are good. They're not like some random human you know down the street. Wait and see if any questions come in because I know that the chat's on a hella delay. So I'm trying to be respectful. Vikram said he's shocked. Vikram, I'm so sorry. It's not like super strong or anything. I'm vibing. Moat asked, when doing color grading, there is a modifier to lock the hue and just to adjust the luminance. Yes, there is. Absolutely. I'm not using it right now, but what Moat is talking about is like after you've found the exact hue and color you like, you can lock that and then just change your saturation and luminance. So you can say, I love, like, for example, actually, this is not even a lie. I love this plum color for this phone case. It's like I just think it's a beautiful color. And so I can say, I like this color. This is the hue that I choose. And now I want it to be deeper, more saturated color, and then a little bit brighter with the luminance. Does that make sense? It just depends on how you want to use it and when. All right, so we found an edit that we like. She looks pretty good. I'm going to make like a little curves change here for y'all. Just bring my highlights up a little bit. Reduce my black point a little bit. And now we have an edit we like. Look at this. We're good. Maybe lastly, we come down here where her face is. We go to our color mixer, which is over in this right corner. It's right down here. Remember, as we've been kind of discussing, there's hue, saturation, and luminance. I want to maybe bring my saturation of the orange down a little bit because I'm noticing that if you look at this before photo, obviously like skin is reflective, and since there's light all around her, you're starting to see the orange pick up on her face. And I just don't think that it's the best thing in the world to have my subject, who's very stunning, look a different color than she's supposed to, right? And you can see it now. Like, look at how this, how warm I look in this image. Obviously I'm reflecting off the screen. I have an orange hoodie on, but like, let's say we just slide even this way. Look at the difference. Here, let me show you. This is me with an orange photo right here. This is me with a pink photo. This is me with a blue photo. Look at just these subtle differences, even from a computer screen. So obviously, remember, photography, art of observation, and we're going to keep going. All right, so we got it. We're going. Now we're going to copy our edit just like I taught you. Command C. If you got on here, you can hit it. Hit Option Command C, and you're seeing that little reminder that you copied your edit. And now here's a bunch of other photos that I've used for test edits before. You see these differences. These are really dark. I don't think reflective of how she looks. So I'm going to hit Command V. Let's see how different she might look. Wow. That looks like a regular person and not the test edit that I was doing before. All right. Okay, so obviously with this photo, the edit that we made on the last one and talking about consistency was a little further away. And so for this one, some of the changes we made, of the edits we made for this make her look a little colder, right? And that wasn't my intention. So once again, we hit our before and we see the difference. We see that I maybe brought up my shadows too much. We're losing detail on her face, right? This before and after. It just looks brighter, but it looks off. So remember that we brought our orange down a little bit. Let's try to do a better job of like fixing this edit, which I'm going to do. Oh, no. So, Mo, you're right. This photo is not super warm. If you look at the cyan here, you're super right. But in terms of establishing consistency, you can see that because of this orange background, we're getting this orange on her face and on her hands in a way, and we have to figure out how we want to manage that. And that's what I mean by consistency. I'm just trying to show examples of how we paste presets, what happens next. Vikram asked what kind of photography I do. Here, let me show you. Vikram, I am a visual artist. I do some directing, I do some art direction, but I also obviously love photography. And the photography that I like to do is portraiture. I like it to feel really intimate, like you're almost there with them. It's like if you look at this, like I want my subject to feel through eye contact and like kind of the mystery of the image that they're close by, and it's not only a theme that they can understand and be a part of, but one that is representative of an experience that they've had. I really hope that my lens is reflective of the time. Like I just find that to be a great honor. Quick side note: this photo was this photo was hilariously difficult to take. It's taken like 6 stories up, but that foreground, I think I still love this photo really, really dearly. I appreciate the two of y'all a lot. Vikram, please don't be a stranger and like come ask me more questions in the future. But Vikram, there's a lot of, I like my photos to have a lot of mood, even if the eyes aren't on the subject. If they're away from the subject, they're focused towards something else in the future. And like sometimes, especially in bright daylight, it can be like used to kind of overpower the image and make you feel a part of it, but confused about like what you're missing, what you're not seeing. Sometimes they're subtle like this. Did that answer your question, Vikram? And let me just, I always forget to do it, so let me do it. This is, you can follow me on Instagram if you want. I have some like how-tos, and then I also have like my actual work, like this portrait that I really loved. And then I also have this series called Equity Through Editing. So I know some of y'all might be following me because of that. The way that this project worked is it is a Lightroom focused project that kind of helps you understand some of the stuff we're talking about tonight, why you use color mix, how you do a better job of being consistent as a photographer, especially when you're photographing black and brown skin. It talks about how you can, it talks about how you can like better communicate with your subjects and how you can be more open, not only to re-editing your images, but understanding what folks are looking for when they hire you. And maybe this is your first time photographing someone of that skin tone. Oh, sorry. That was the wrong thing to do. So obviously here I can walk through like how, I mean, we're talking about this today, like presets are for a specific situation. But, you know, if you use presets without thinking, you can see, especially if you don't, if you forget to change, or if you forget to change the temperature and the tint, you can see how it's altering her skin heavily. And the best way to know is look at the background of the image. It's supposed to be white, right? And see how it gets orange further along from this original photo to here. If your image is altering the white and the black point, or excuse me, the color of the white point, you're in bad shape. So you can see, like, basically through Equity Through Editing, I made a series of like really clear examples. And then I also did these kind of like work with me screen captures. And that can kind of help you work through, you know, the how and why FY did things, you know, in case you get tired of watching me in the stream and want a shorter version of me. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Oh no, a bunch of people just started watching my stream on Adobe Live. That's hilarious. Thank you, everyone. Vikram, I appreciate what you said. Let's bring this home. Let's get this edit done. So when you're copying and pasting, right, we paste with this edit. What do we want to do? All right. I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. I'm going to bring my shadows down a little bit. I think my issue is I flattened this image so much. I edited this for an atmospheric photo and now a photo of someone's face, which I don't think is great. And so I actually think I might want to go to versions, just like before, go to my original. And I want to work from there. And sometimes with consistency, that means your preset is your opportunity to see a reference point. Or actually, you know what? I think y'all would be more happy if I worked from the preset so you can know what I mean. All right, so still, there's a lot of orange on her face. Let's go back to our adjustment brush. Let's just paint in her face. Basically, I just don't want to treat her face in the background with the same edits. And so I'm going to go down to hue, which you see here. And I'm just going to, you see what happens if you use this incorrectly, though. It's like the worst thing you could do to somebody. Sorry, I'm going to. I got to turn off fine adjustment because this thing is like so annoying to use. Okay, hold on. Jeez, sorry, y'all. Just gonna use hue. And now I add a little saturation, and now she just looks a little better. And you notice that she just looks a little bit less like show stage orange and more like a human being, right? Vikram, I appreciate the comment. I do my best, right? And so we have like an image that looks a little better. She looks like herself. Let's see our before and after. And so to kind of wrap this, I realize I kind of maybe chose the worst photo as an example, but like you need your consistency to translate across multiple images, right? That means like right now saying to myself, I had a preset that I set just for her face, right? Or excuse me, just for a wider image. But when I use her face, the edit that I had there isn't going to work the same. So how do I go back? How do I know my subject matter, and edit it properly? It means observing and saying, this is more orange than I wanted it to be. So I can take this highlight away. I can make my shadow a little bit bluer. Oh, hold on. Bring my saturation up. And now we're in a slightly better situation, right? It just looks a little better. I realize that for y'all, it looks a little funny because I just realized that the way it's showing. Vikram said, what is applied photography and what are the different ways where applied photography is used? I don't know, Vikram. Applied photography is just like taking the principles of photography and applying it. Excuse me. Vikram, applied photography, I think, is just understanding the principles of what you need to create and applying it. All right, enough. And bring the luminance of this up. The real problem with this image, I've been meaning to tell y'all, is that it's just actually too red, which is surprising. Now we're back to just something a little bit more natural. There we go. Oh, that I actually had a hard time editing this, and I was doing it live, but it just shows sometimes consistency is hard, y'all. I'm going to wrap up in a second. So Vikram, anyone else that's watching, please let me know if you had a question or anything, and I'm happy to go over it before I get up out of here. Mode, I appreciate that comment. It's great to choose the perfect photos. Quite a few have some potential, and one can't redo. I've got away with that quite a few times reading the situation. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's important to show examples so people don't think that everything they do needs to be absolutely perfect. It's just not how that works, you know? But anyway, I'm going to wrap on this up in a minute. So anyone that's watching, I just want to say I appreciate you for being a part of it. Thanks for hanging out with me on a Saturday or Friday night. Saturday, I don't want to rush my weekend. But let's chop it up soon, y'all. And I will let this ride for a couple minutes, or excuse me, about a minute. So when people have questions, I can answer it before I bounce. But I'm going to take a sec. Bust a couple moves while I wait. Just because I know that the chat has like a 20, 30-second delay. Finish up this wine. After this, if you're curious, I will be shaving and taking a shower, and then eating a really late dinner because I apparently don't care about myself at all. This is looking cool, though. D and B, and you are done. I appreciate that. Dude, Mo, you got to follow me other places on the internet so we can make sure we chop it up. Because I stream on Behance and post projects on Behance, but I should probably be more active on Behance, actually. I think about it. I don't know. So I don't know. I mean, I should definitely be more active on Behance. To the new followers, I'm sorry that I won't be staying any longer. You can watch this video later. It is how to edit and how to establish consistent. It is how to edit and establish consistency in your image making so that you as a photographer can maintain a style. We talked about color. We talked about scouting our locations. We talked about understanding you can control your color, but you can't control your light. As always, thank you, everyone. Moat, I'll see you on the other side. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, you know where to find me, my G. Shout out to Hamburg, Germany, where you're from. I appreciate the energy and for sticking around. Everyone else that came, appreciate y'all too. Peace.